Welcome to the Minnesota Liberty Network, and here are your hosts, Bill Liskey and Drew Roach.
Welcome back. It's been a long time.
It has been. We've, haven't had as many shows as we like as of recently, but I think we're definitely going to be more consistent here moving forward.
Yeah, I think we're going to pick it up a bit. And,
Absolutely.
Today I'll call this a special episode because we're probably not going to go through a ton of all of the things that we want to go through, but one of the most important things, at least in my book, is our law enforcement officers. And with us, we have a guest. Why don't you introduce our guest here, Drew?
So we have Chris Steward here. He's a head of the Heroes Helping Heroes organization, and Chris has been a strong advocate to help law enforcement and public safety officers and public safety workers in general when they get injured on the job. So. And Chris can talk more about that, but I've connected with Chris and Bill has as well. And, we specifically today want to talk about the pension bill that went forward, both the House and the Senate, and got passed into law when Tim Walz signed it into law. What was it, the 20th?
May 23rd. It was on his desk on the 20th, and he signed it on the 23rd.
So Bill and I are going to be strong advocates to see what we can do to educate members of the legislature and make sure that we get this repealed and stand with our men and women of law enforcement. So, Chris, if you like, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is Heroes Helping Heroes does and how we can support you.
Yeah, so I'm a medically retired Minneapolis police officer. I spent a little less than 15 years with Minneapolis Police. Was forced to leave after the riots in 2020 when I was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Going through the process, I was ashamed. I was isolated, and there wasn't really any organizations out there helping first responders. There was quite a few helping our military with PTSD, and rightfully so, but nothing helping our first responders. So that is why we created Heroes Helping Heroes. And we're a nonprofit 501c3 here in Minnesota, helping both active and retired first responders who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorders, psychological issues, from the traumas that they see and are exposed to throughout their careers as police officers, firefighters, paramedics, correctional officers. We see a lot of horrific things throughout our careers. And Heroes Helping Heroes is a peer-to-peer support group. And we take people out and do mostly outdoor activities, whether it's hunting, fishing, camping. It's all about getting people together who've experienced a lot of same and similar situations and let them know that, hey, it's okay to be not okay. And just help them cope with the traumas that they've faced throughout their careers and hopefully keep them in a profession that they love doing, because not a single one of us who were forced to leave our professions, either with a physical injury or a psychological injury, wanted to leave in this way. We were forced to, and it was an injury that we sustained and suffered from as a result of serving our communities in the roles that we're in.
Chris, thanks for coming. That's the first thing I want to say is because it's not easy to admit when you have a problem, right? Especially as a law enforcement officer, your job is to stand proud and to work hard and show no fear and no weakness, right? And it's even harder when you have to now admit that you can't do that anymore. Is that right?
Very, very true. You're taught that you can't show any emotion when you're working, because when you go to a traumatic scene, people are only calling the cops probably in one of their worst moments of their lives.
Right.
And you got to go there and hopefully solve the issue, potentially, save a life. And you can't be showing emotion while you're doing that. You have to be composed, you have to be professional, and you have to do what you're trained to do. So we've been taught our entire careers that, you can't show any emotion, and you can't go through these careers without having them psychologically change and affect who you are as an individual. You see the worst of the worst way too often.
Yeah.
And it's I always tell people 50% of the trauma is the incident itself, the trauma that you're exposed to, whether it's going to a fatal car accident, being involved in an officer-involved shooting, or being shot at, going to a baby not breathing call. You see horrific things throughout your career, and if you're not affected by it, it says something about your psychological state going into it. But again, 50% of it is the trauma itself, and the other 50% is the resources that you provided after a traumatic incident, especially the support from your fellow officers, the support from the department, the support from the community. And far too often these days, there is no support from the departments, from the police administrations, from the cities, and from the community. Unlike the public, who is innocent until proven guilty, cops are guilty until proven innocent these days. And that puts a tremendous psychological burden on officers these days.
Absolutely. So,
And
I'm gonna give a rundown on the bills, and then we'll get back into talking about why and how bad this is for you guys. So we had House File 1234, I believe, in 2023, if I'm remembering the number correctly. That was the first shot across the bow for duty disabled individuals, and basically it was going to be, if you were retired due to disability, your pensions were going to be basically brought into question, and you had to prove that you were still disabled. You still had to go back to the doctor, and they also removed about how much you could make post disabled or disability, and it was going to affect basically whether you qualified for your pension anymore or not. I think that's correct. Is that right, Chris?
Yes, sir.
And then fast forward to just a few weeks ago, May 19th, both in the House and in the Senate, we passed Senate File 3045. And unfortunately, that bill specifically now is also taking away even more benefits, right? So not only are you not going to qualify for your pension plan if you don't meet certain criteria, but now you're also not going to get health care past 5 years, anybody going forward. So if they're declared disabled, they're no longer going to qualify for health care after 60 months. Is that kind of where we're at?
Yeah, past 65. So the old language was if you're injured in the line of duty and if you're forced to leave your profession, your service to the community, to the state, as a result, you would have health insurance that was paid for by the departments until age 65. And
that's correct.
Now they've limited it to only 5 years.
5 years, and then after 50, if you're 55 or older, right, you no longer get any health care.
With 20 years of service.
Yeah. So if you're eligible to retire underneath PARA, so the Public Employees Retirement Association, it's 20 years of service and age 55 or more. So if you're age 55 with 20 years of service on, you get catastrophically injured day 50 or 55 years old in one day, you don't get any health insurance. You could be eating out of an eating tube on a ventilator the rest of your life,
and you'll get no health insurance. You don't have a
single penny of health insurance. It's mind-boggling that these organizations that are supposed to be representing police and fire have taken away benefits for police and fire. They're supposed to be fighting for our benefits, and this session they did the exact opposite.
So, Chris, my question to you is I definitely in the House. I mean, the Senate, they did a fairly good job. They had more members on their side of the aisle that were no votes on that, and seemed to have more info on those particulars, and hence why they voted no. In the House, I tried to sound the alarm and bring awareness to some of these issues within this pension plan, but it was pushed back on, and there were some wins. So can you explain what some of those wins were in this bill that would cause some people to think that it was a good bill?
Yes. So it's very misleading with what they've done with this legislation. So they on the front side of this legislation, they tied it into pensions, and they gave an increase in uh, COLA costs, so increase of living costs for those already retired. They'll receive a one-time 2% jump, and then another 1% jump compared to the traditional 1% each year. There'll be another 2% on top of that, and another 1% in 2027, I
Yes.
believe.
Yep. You're right.
So with that, they were like, hey, like we're getting $20 million from the legislature. We're going to increase the COLA cost for individuals who have already retired. And then on the backside of the legislation, they're like, somehow they tied taking away health insurance to the pension fund, and they were saying that the pension fund is struggling, it's going underneath water due to all these people leaving with injuries, that we got to do something about it. So that's why they put in that they took away health insurance for individuals serving their communities and being injured as a result of that. So it's very misleading. So on the front side of the bill, they say, hey, our pension's great. We got money to give to retirees. And then on the back side of the bill, they're like, hey, our pension is so bad, it's going underneath water. This is what we need to do to fix it or help implement something. And it's a complete lie. If anybody paid any attention to Para's own financial report from June of 2024, just about a year ago, their pension report stated that the fund is strong, and it is going to continue to grow over the next several years. So again, it was very misleading by these individuals pushing this legislation, and it was specifically targeting those with psychological injuries.
Yeah, and that was something that, on the Senate floor we heard about a lot, right? Is that we heard two sides of that story. We heard first that they needed more money and they could do all this with this magical bill. They were going to solve a whole bunch of problems. They were going to increase COLA, which was the big selling point, right? Was, hey, all of these individuals are going to get a nice increase to the COLA. Everybody's celebrating that story, and MPPOA is super in support. The chief associations in support. The firemen's chiefs are in support. Everybody's in support.
League of Minnesota Cities
is excited about it. Everybody's celebrating this bill, right? That's what I'm hearing on the Senate floor. Then, Senator Howe gets up and starts talking, and he's the chief author of this disability side, and I had talked to him at length for the entire session. I told him, I said, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a lot worse than you think it is. Your language is not helpful. It's actually going to make things worse. And he agreed. He actually ended up agreeing with me. He actually ended up having a hard time, and he talked about it on the Senate floor. He said, this is not the way we solve the problem that they're claiming there is. This is going to actually make it worse, and it's actually going to affect both the physically and the mentally disabled duty officers, and they're not going to be able to get these healthcare benefits because of the way the language was written. So unless you're 100% disabled, which, by the way, as a medical provider myself, it is very difficult to get a 100% disability rating. It's not common. It actually takes a lot to prove that you can't do anything. Basically, my mom had a stroke in 2014, and she had a full left hemisphere stroke. She ended up losing her ability to see off the right side. Both eyes are blind to the right. Her right arm and her right leg do not work correctly, and she had to fight for 2.5 years to get disability, because if she could lick a stamp, she was told, if you can lick a stamp, you can work. That's what she was told. And so with that, I worry that that's the path we're headed down with this duty disability changes. We're getting to the point where you're going to get told if you can work even a little bit, you're not going to qualify for any benefits.
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, just the way that the healthcare system works, I mean, if you get injured, you go see your primary doctor, and they have to, put in a referral to a specialist. And then to get into a back specialist or a knee specialist, that takes, sometimes 6 months, 8 months.
And it costs a ton of
year,
money.
And you got to come back. So for me, one of the biggest things was the 60 month. It says, you get injured and you have 60 months or 5 years. To put an end date on a recovery time so broadly is just so unfair and unright and unethical that it's not something that can even, it's not even realistic. Sure, in some cases, if you're injured, in theory, you should be able to get well within 60 months. But the way the system works and how long, some of those appointments are pushed out and the continued, care that you need to get with those specialists, there's no proof or guarantee that you'll, be fully recovered in that 60-month period. So
and who knows where you're actually going to plateau in that 5 years?
Exactly.
Right? No one knows what a plateau is until you're there.
Exactly.
So that's the other hard part.
Yeah.
Is that right, Chris? That's kind of where we're at on this. That's pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it is.
The other thing that you brought up, Chris, is that there was $20 million was put into this pensions bill. It's not just police officers, firefighters, and public safety officials in general, emergency response team. It's actually also tied to the teachers' pensions, right? And that was the other thing, is the teachers got their increase, right? That's the thing that everybody was really excited about, was that these teachers that have been suffering, Tier 2 teachers, have been in rough shape. And they've been paying out of their pocket to cover other pensions, not their own, right? So their own money, which should be going into their pension plan, is going in to pay for other teachers' pensions that isn't even who they, it doesn't go into their own pocket. So that's the reason why they were starting to do this, and that's why some of that money got put in towards that. The thing is that we put in only $20 million, and it was going to cost $40 million, but we said in the future, within the next 5 years, we'll finish filling that bank account, because, of course, we don't actually have the money to fill that right now. And so my concern is that if we don't readdress this next year or the year after, this still could throw the entire para system into solvency issues. And that's not just teacher pensions. That's, like you said, all other public employee retiree accounts are running a risk, right? We're looking at a major problem that we could be pushing down the road.
Very true. And I'm not saying that there isn't an issue with the system. I don't think the system is broken like people say. I think it can be improved.
Sure.
But what they've done over the last couple of years has not improved it. And back in 2023, they're like, "Hey, this is going to be the solution to the problem." And 2 years later, lo and behold, what we're telling them back in 2023 is true. Like, you're not addressing the root problem or the root cause of these problems. You're not looking at solving the issue. You're just looking at punishing individuals.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's the thing that bothered me the most, is like, we're not asking the cause. We're just we're going to cover the issue, right? The problem is, according to the pensions plan system, right, is there's a problem with more disability people than what they projected. Okay, so let's just say that's the problem. But they're not addressing the solution, right? They're coming in and going, well, this is the problem, so guess what? Instead of finding the root cause of why there's more people going out on duty disability, instead of finding the why, we're just going to kick them off the system. Then we don't have to worry about it. It's not part of the problem anymore. That's the way I interpreted what's going on.
And the way it was also, kind of sold was that there was two positives in this. One was the increase in the COLA area, but also what they were doing is they were preventing future fraud, is the way it was kind of billed, right? Because the argument is that there's an increase in these PTSD claims, and some of these, if not, a good chunk of them, is how it was described, is that some of these are fraudulent, right? And so we need to make sure that we prevent the fraud going forward. And for me, and I'm sure Bill will say it as well, this wasn't a productive way to prevent fraud. If there is fraud within the claims, in the disability side of this, then put guardrails up and make it so that there's actual punishment for those that are caught up in the fraud, not take away from members and public safety workers that are trying to do the right thing, that want to do the job that they were called to do. Public safety workers, this isn't a job they just clock in and they just do to collect a check. This is something they were called to do. These people do what they do because they love what they do. And so and I'm speaking for them in this regard because I've talked to a lot of them. They don't look forward to claiming disability. This is not something that they envisioned in their career. So again, to go after and take away healthcare for those that potentially might have an issue going forward was not a way to prevent fraud at all.
Yeah, and I'm going to push back on you a little bit when it comes to fraud. Most people aren't aware of the steps when it comes to applying for duty disability. For both physicals and psychologicals, you have to see at least 4 doctors before you're even allowed to file for duty disability. And when it comes to psychological injuries, it usually is 7+ doctors all signing off saying that, hey, like you've got psychological injuries that prevent you from doing your job for more than 1 year. And people are always like, well, people are taking advantage of the system, or people are faking it. Well, prove it. If there's fraud within the system, then call these individuals out. Bring forth the evidence, and I'll be the first one to say, hey, here's the evidence. This person doesn't deserve it. But nobody ever does that because there's a system in place that works really, really well. Is that you've got independent doctors who don't know you, and you have numerous ones of them signing off and saying, hey, like they're all saying that you've got this exact same condition that prevents you from doing this career. And then PARA also has the ability to make people reapply and go through psychological evaluations and physical evaluations every year for the first 5 years, and then every 3 years after that. So there are checks and balances along the way. And if people are so-called faking it, which it's very hard to do, I would say that people who claim others are faking it are just not informed very well of what the process is, or exactly what post-traumatic stress disorder is, and the psychological issues that come with doing this profession and the amount of trauma that individuals see. So again, I think there's ways of improving the system, but I will push back really hard and say that there is virtually no fraud, if any, just because there are so many checks and balances that again, the PARA, the retirement system, they have the ability to make you get reevaluated. And I know every year every year that I've been out, I've been sent a letter saying, hey, like, prove that you still qualify for duty disability, and I have to have my doctor sign off saying, hey, like, Chris still has PTSD that prevents him from doing his profession. So again, I think that there's very little fraud, and there's, in my opinion, I don't know a single person faking it.
No, and I appreciate that, I'm just telling you how it was sold as, right? I'm not suggesting that's the case. I'm just saying that is, how it was billed and packaged and
that's how it was presented to the public.
Presented to the public,
and that's the thing I think that Drew and I both got super annoyed with, is neither of us agree that there's a significant amount of fraud. In fact, I'm not going to try and put words in Drew's mouth, but I'm going to put it out there. As a healthcare provider myself, I can tell you right now, nobody's generally faking a disability. It takes a lot to actually prove that you're faking a disability, because it's really hard to fake. Like you said, the reality is a lot of people, especially on PTSD situations, you can actually do a chemical test checking their blood work for cortisol levels, and you will see that their genetic makeup, or in this case, their enzymes and their hormones in their bloodstream, are actually changed forever. They're not the same as they were before they went through a PTSD situation. So it's chemically provable.
It is, and you can also do a brain scan, and it'll show you the exact same thing. It's very similar. Individuals with PTSD have a lot of the same brain injury
markers. I
think markers that somebody with a traumatic brain injury has.
Correct.
So again, like this people aren't faking. Like this is stuff that can be proven. Science has proved it.
And I think the thing that we actually need to address again is back to what you were saying is, look, none of these air quotes solutions that they are providing are actually solutions. They're just covering up the actual problem. The real problem is, why are officers going and getting PTSD? Why are these members being disabled mentally? Because again, we're in a mental health crisis, not just in this realm of what we're talking about, but as a large population. We have grown into a mental health crisis, and to talk about mental health as a fraud possibility, that's what made me the most mad, I think, in the last two cycles, is in 2023 when they started it down that path, and now again in 2025, just continues that discussion. I talked about it in 2023. I said, look, mental health is a real problem, and to say that, only police officers are making up their mental health issues, that's ridiculous. And that's exactly what it seems to be that they're presenting. So I like to call that out. Stop using that as an excuse. It's not a fraud thing. It's a real thing. And we need to solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, and one of my biggest things with this was just how it was packaged in the omnibus bill, right? I mean, because one of the things that we've heard this legislative session from day one until the end of session was the teacher pension reform, and how that needed to be, a top priority, and was. I mean, we were getting emails. I'm sure you were, Bill. I know I was
every day.
50, 100 a day from teachers, for months of reforming their pension. And as I stated on the House floor, there was some good wins in this pension reform for teachers, for educators, but because we do these packaged omnibus bills, you have to take the bad in this case with the good, right? And so for me, that was my big frustration with it, is that I had to pit teachers versus law enforcement versus public safety workers, and I don't feel that that's right. I don't think that's the way we should go about making change and writing law in this state, or furthermore in this country. Had these been standalone bills, they would have been able to stand on their own merit, and I don't think there would have been the support for the reform on the law enforcement and public safety side of this, because members would have been able to put the two against each other. You would have been able to see them differently. But in this case, you had to take the good with what was sold as good on the police side with the good that was the teacher reform, because it was a big win for teachers. The penalty for educators now to take their retirement before 65 significantly reduced from a 35% reduction to a penalty to a 14%. So it was a huge decrease, 21%. Decrease that penalty that they'll get. So it was a big win for educators, but again, it came at the cost of taking away long-term care for public safety workers, and that's just not right. And so for me, that was my big takeaway from it, and the thing that got me the most frustrated with it was, these just omnibus bills that, again, we continue to do. It's just super frustrating.
Yeah. So Chris, I just want you to know, and I want all the law enforcement officers out there to know that, my no vote wasn't against teachers. It was for you guys, right? My no vote was to signal how upset I am and how much I'm trying to defend you guys. And it's the same story to the teachers. I've been very vocal to a lot of my teachers. I got a lot of emails in heat from the teachers' side saying, how dare you vote against pensions? I'm glad it passed, but how dare you? I thought you said you were in support of teachers, which I have been, and I've been very much an advocate to trying to fix their pensions, because whoever made up this weird tier 1, tier 2 system way back before I was in the legislature, they messed it up, and they messed it up royally. And now it's on us to try and fix it. I would have loved to have voted on the teachers portion and then separate out the law enforcement and the public safety officers portion. It should have been two separate bills. It should have never been together, because then I would have absolutely been able to vote the way that I would vote, which is yes on fixing teacher stuff and no on hurting police officers.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, or the other way, which it probably should have been done this way, but they try to slide it in last minute without anybody noticing it. which is why you didn't hear a lot of pushback from cops and firefighters, because the rank and file weren't aware of what was happening.
Well, of course not.
The largest labor union in the state for law enforcement, LELS, wasn't aware of this happening until after it was done. It was done behind closed doors in the 11th hour with the League of Minnesota Cities, Minnesota Professional Firefighters Association, and MPPOA, Minnesota Peace and Police Officers Association. If it was so great, they should have been touting it to their membership,
Right.
but they weren't. They were hiding it the entire way. They were.
Oh, did we lose him? Yeah, I think Zoom might have ended on us.
I think it did.
Well, we'll be right back.
Hang tight.
You want us to keep going?
Well, so yeah, we'll touch base till we get Chris back on. But yeah, no, I mean it was again super frustrating the way that played out, and I think we'll have a continued discussion about this, and I think we can bring on an educator. I talked to a gal that called me. She was head of Minnesota Educators Pension Reform,
Right.
And she was expressed her appreciation for the way a lot of the members voted, because she saw it the same way, and that there were some really big wins for teachers there. But at the same time, having these two bills pitted against each other in the form of an omnibus bill isn't the correct way to go about making any policy or
Right.
or financial changes.
And here's the thing. My answer is simple. If your bill doesn't have the votes, then it shouldn't go forward. It's something that frustrates me to no end. It's like, I know my bills can make it. I know my bills have the votes. Even if the chair themselves doesn't support my bill, I can tell you right now my bill can go forward.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, it's the opposite in this case. Well, we're going to shove it in an omnibus bill, and you're either going to vote for the omnibus bill or you're not.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to defend some of my colleagues with this. Is I know a lot of them had they
known the problems,
they
would have voted no as well.
And I tried to express that, but again, because there was such a big win in this with the teachers, it seemed to be kind of brushed under the rug.
Yeah.
And I kind of it's made out to be my my pushback wasn't necessarily that valid. But I do believe that when my members, colleagues, catch wind of some of the stuff that happened and what the losses were in this, they're more informed. I shouldn't say more informed, but more aware of the negative side of this, that they wouldn't have voted the way they did, right?
No,
they would have.
I'm
been
100%.
outspoken.
I'm 100% certain they would have been at least more outspoken. Like I said, Senator Howe was telling me he would have loved to have voted against it, but it was really hard for him because he had to decide: do I vote against it because of this part, or do I vote for it because of all the good things? And in his case, he erred on the side of he wanted to vote for the good things. The thing that I was most concerned with is, again, if we could just get these bills, these omnibus bills, to be separated out into good or bad bills, we would have a much better idea of how to fix these things. And I will always advocate for single subject bills. I will always advocate for the better answer. And that's something that's been bothering me since the beginning. Chris, we got you back?
Yeah, sorry, Zoom must have just timed out
Yep.
there.
So Zoom every now and then cancels out on us. So apologize. And we'll let you go back to what you were saying. And we were just kind of continuing down the path as to why a lot of our colleagues might have voted for this bill, even if they didn't agree with the police officers' part.
Yeah, what I was saying is that again, if this legislation was so great, like these organizations that represent police and fire would have been toting how great this legislation was, but they weren't. They were hiding it. And the legislation should have been the pension side. The police pension could have been tied in with the teacher's pension. But when it came to healthcare, that should have been a completely separate bill and probably in a different committee. It should have been roped in the pension committee and with this pension bill.
So I'm going to speak to that just a little bit from my experience of being there and kind of the know-how of the weird inner workings, right? A lot of the people on the outside have no idea how a lot of these bills work and why they get tied the way they do. And so specifically the reason that healthcare that specific healthcare portion was tied into the pensions bill, and I'm gonna kind of push back on you a little, but also defend you if that makes any sense. So,
Yeah.
The reason why this healthcare bill was tied into the pensions discussion in general is because those healthcare plans are paid for via the para program. So the funding comes out of the same location, and that's the reason that bill gets stuck in the pensions bill. Now, again, I will defend you on the aspect that I don't think it's something that should have been discussed behind closed doors like it was. And in fact, if you go back to the day of the vote, I even read off on the floor that MPPOA was actually opposed to that specific portion of the pensions bill. They had a 6-5 vote with their leadership team, their core team, voted to oppose that segment of the bill. So even MPPOA didn't support that by the time that section of the bill was coming forward, but it had already been too late, right? They were under the impression of the few members of MPPOA that had been supporting that section. They took it as that was fine and it was good to go, which now that it had been taken to a vote of their board, now they realize maybe that wasn't such a great idea. But of course, the process, the way it works, it starts rolling back in January, and the thing about the pensions committee is the weirdest part about it. It's a bicameral committee. It's I think it is one of, if not the only bicameral committee in the entire legislature in the state of Minnesota, meaning that both House members and Senate members from both parties are sitting on that committee together. So that committee is made up of a whole group of House, Senate, Republicans, and Democrats all on the same committee, and they don't have to have two separate committees for that, right? So like in the Senate, we have Health and Human Services. In the House, they have Health Finance. Well, those two committees technically communicate together, but they are never meeting at the same time, where the Pensions Committee meets at the same time. And so that's kind of why, and the weird inner workings of why the bill went forward the way it did, is because they already had approval from the House members and the Senate members for that bill to go forward. It's not necessarily right. It's just that's why it's happening the way it is, and what seems like behind closed doors, because again, it's happening two different committees instead of two different committees where you have two chances to catch on to what's happening. You can only follow the one committee. You only have one committee scheduled to pay attention to. Well, that's good in some aspects, but bad in the fact that if you miss that one day, you miss the whole thing.
Yeah. Thanks for educating me on that. I've learned more in the last couple of years about the way that the state works legislatively than I ever thought I would have.
Right. Me too. I'm right there with you. I never would have thought that.
Which in this case is what made it, I don't want to say easy, but it's what made it easy for it to go through, because there wasn't time for members to catch up and be educated on the pushback of the negative aspects of the provisions in the bill.
And
right?
That's 100% right. And the only reason that the Senate had more, like you said, you felt like the Senate had more information. I believe there was 12 senators that voted no, and there was one House rep that voted no, Mr. Roach.
Yes.
And the reason why 12 senators got to vote against it is because I've been following this specific part of legislation, right? Duty disability. I've actually got a bill. I believe Drew is actually the chief author now this year. I've got a bill to try and actually change it in the positive and try and make it so that duty disability can actually earn a living still on the outside of the equation, instead of having to donate 50 cents for every dollar they earn back into the pension system. I've got that, and so I've been following duty disability since I started in the legislature. And that's the only reason why the Senate is more informed, is because for 3 years now, I've been talking about it, and I've been making sure my colleagues are well informed when this type of stuff comes forward.
Yeah. And that's something that, doesn't get a whole lot of talking about, right? The pension part was something that it got brought on last minute.
Well, and unless you're on the pensions committee, you have no idea where they're at, because they're not meeting every day.
Correct.
They're not meeting every week like we do.
Yeah.
All these other committees, they meet a set schedule.
Yeah.
Pensions committee, I believe, meets kind of as at the call of the chairs.
Yeah. In the House, we presented this bill hours before we voted on it.
Yep.
Right.
And
so it wasn't very much time, and it was a lengthy bill with a lot of provisions in it. So to be able to, be fully informed on everything in there, and like I said, again, all the wins and losses in it. When you're just sold the wins, it's harder to find the losses, right? You really need to be doing your due diligence and making sure you're connecting all the dots. And I was, fortunate enough to have some constituents reach out.
Yep.
And that's really what helped me. And then having a conversation with you and other members was really what got me really concerned and doing my due diligence on this prior to the vote. And again, tried to wave the red flags as best I could, but obviously, when there's big wins in there for teachers, it makes it harder to flag the bad things in there. So.
Yeah, and I've every teacher I've talked to after explaining our votes, and why I said no, every single teacher has been understanding.
Yep.
They said, "Will, we appreciate that the bill passed because, of course, they're excited about their changes, but they also understand now why I voted no, and they understand that it was unfair. They don't like that they were now at the win at the loss of somebody else.
Yeah,
because not a single teacher out there supported the message that once we explained to them why we voted no, they didn't support the bill at all. They realized how bad it was, that they now are benefiting on the backs of somebody else.
Yeah, there was a few teachers that were commenting negatively on a social media page. They got 20,000 members on this page, and it's specifically in regards to pension reform. And there was some negativity on there, but once the body in that social media group was educated on the why, myself included, voted no on that, I put out there my phone number, right? I want people that have any issues or questions the way I vote to be able to reach out to me at any time. And so putting that out there and allowing educators to reach out and have those conversations and ask those tough questions and to understand the why really helps them, understand why we got to where we got to and why I made the decision that I did. And so like I stated earlier, I talked to a lady who runs that page and is a huge advocate for teachers reform. And she thanked me for it and understood that if she was put in that same situation, she would have probably voted the same exact way. And it just, again, we've been beating this horse time and time again, but this is the problem that we have with omnibus bills, right? Is the continued losses that we get in there, pitting them versus some of the good things. So one thing that I've learned since this happened is exactly what the MPPOA is. And I'm not going to go after the MPPOA by any means, but from what I gathered talking to a bunch of people, the MPPOA, a lot of people believe that they are a union. And in fact, they are just a lobbying group for the police's union. Is that correct, Chris?
That is 100% true.
So, when people see the MPPOA out there and they're saying, "Oh, they're speaking for cops," well, yes and no. Or that they're the union for law enforcement. That's not quite the truth. The LELS hires the MPPOA to do their government relations duties at the Capitol. And that's kind of what MPPOA sells themselves as the voice of law enforcement. And they say that they have all these members, but in reality, I believe they have 10,000 members, but almost 8,000 of those 10,000 are actual LELS members. Correct. Okay.
Well, Chris, my question to you, and so this is obviously a public forum, is going to be out there for people to hear and to see and to listen to and kind of have an understanding of what's going on. Something that I want to reach back to and kind of start all over a little bit is, what can we do going forward? What can the public do, but also what can we as legislators do to try and help the situation that's going on?
It's going to be a huge uphill battle.
Yep.
Once you give away something, and this should have been a huge collective bargaining issue with all the unions fighting back, is they gave up health insurance for their members when they get injured in line of duty. And what did they get back? They got absolutely nothing back. So if trying to get something back that you've given up, it's going to be extremely tough. But we need to start protecting our first responders again, our cops, start supporting them, hold criminals accountable. A lot of the trauma that we see is because these criminals are repeat offenders and they're never held accountable for their actions. So they're back out, causing more mayhem, more crimes, and exposing cops to more trauma. So hold criminals accountable, support law enforcement, try to get this healthcare provision back, and we're 1,200 cops short in the state. This legislation that passed isn't going to help recruitment in either the police or the fire field. And if to kind of go off on a side note, Para's losing almost $30 million a year by being short 1,200 cops. So again, if Para was concerned about their pension plan, then maybe they should look at supporting law enforcement and getting more people in law enforcement and thus getting more money donated into Para. But it's going to be talking to individuals like myself, like LALS, like some of these small unions that don't have a voice, that aren't represented by MPPOA, by or MPFF, because a lot of these departments aren't fairly represented, and more times than not, those organizations aren't pushing what the rank and file want.
Sure.
So if I could, Chris, for all the organizations that were pushing this, what did they get out of this? What was the win in them advocating for this change?
You had certain individuals at the top of those organizations that don't believe police and fire can get post-traumatic stress disorder. This legislation initially started out just attacking psychological injuries, nothing to do with physical. I started raising concern like, hey, this is highly unconstitutional at both the state and the federal level. You can't discriminate against protected classes. And then they switched it from both a psychological and physical injury bill, and it's just they got nothing. They gave up health insurance and they got nothing back. But essentially, it was these organizations, the ones at the top, pushing anti-PTSD legislation because they don't believe that cops can get PTSD.
So the League of Minnesota Cities, what would be their incentive to push this forward?
Oh, the League of Minnesota Cities, again, doesn't believe that cops can get or firefighters can get PTSD. But probably one of the biggest reasons besides that they're pushing it is that the League of Minnesota Cities represents obviously a bunch of different cities. They're an insurance trust. And when a police or firefighter gets injured in the line of duty and is forced to leave their profession, the cities are on the hook for the health insurance. It's a measly like $15,000 a year to cover health insurance for an injured first responder. And if you have any city out there saying that, hey, like they had to raise taxes, or like they don't know how to balance their budget for paying for one or two first responders who suffered career-ending injuries, then I would really question the management of the funds within that city. So the League of Minnesota Cities was pushing hard for it because it saves the cities that they represent money.
Yeah. So there's the other bottom line is that it saves the league a bunch of money.
It's liability.
It's all about liability. And the thing that's the hardest part about any job in public service as a legislator, or even I'm going to go out there and talk about, even as a local representative of like a city council or a mayor, some of the hardest things that they have to do is they have to apply dollars to people. That's something that bothers me the most is my job. You kind of somehow have to find a way to separate the emotional from the actual fiscal responsibility you also have. And I'm not going to defend them in this way because, in all honesty, like you said, it's not a significantly large number of people going out on duty disability. And to prove that you're disabled is, as we've talked about, very difficult, and then maintaining that disability, or keeping up and proving that you're still disabled, also quite the hoops to jump through. This shouldn't be one of those things where we should be looking to save money, and that's what bothers me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everybody wants their community to be safe and to be protected, but that doesn't come with no cost associated with it, right? I mean, there is a cost with that, and so whatever we as a community have to do to make sure that we have those essential services, we need to do.
Well, Chris, do you have anything at all you want the population out there, the people to know? Otherwise, we really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, just one final note. For those who may not understand psychological injuries, post-traumatic stress, highly encourage you just to do a little bit of research. Listen to individuals, listen to professionals, not the politicians or city employees who are pushing certain rhetoric. Do research on your own. Find out that it's a very specific diagnosis. It is very hard to obtain a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. You have to meet all this criteria, and if you're even missing one of the criteria, you don't have post-traumatic stress disorder. You may have other issues, but not PTSD. And another thing that people really or comment pretty regularly on is that again, they're either faking it or that PTSD isn't real. Unfortunately, we had 2 paramedics commit suicide last week because of the trauma of their careers. So this trauma is very real. It affects a lot of people in these professions, and I again just learn about PTSD. It's not another myth that people always say it's curable. PTSD is not curable. It's once you have it, you can get better from it. Don't get me wrong. Your symptoms can improve, and that happens with time and not being exposed to those traumas. But it's not curable. So again, just educate yourself on PTSD. If you're going to talk about it, if you're going to push legislation, if you're going to demonize people about it, learn a little bit about it first, and not just follow the talking points.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Chris, because like I said, somebody like myself who is in healthcare and who does see and treat patients who have both PTSD and things like you talked about, very similar. It's very frustrating when you have to work with those individuals and try and understand them, because the person with it can't explain what's wrong with them. And as a healthcare provider, I can't even always explain what they're experiencing or what's going on. And it's an injury. It's a brain injury, but it's still an injury. And to write those off is what bothers me the most. And so I'll keep fighting. I think Drew is going to keep fighting with me. He wouldn't have voted with me this way if he wasn't. The reality is we just need to educate more people. And with your help here, I think we're going to get somewhere, and I think we're going to keep trying. This battle may be uphill, but I'm never afraid to fight. So I'll keep trying. Yeah,
you got. I second that, Bill. I've been chatting with Chris here for the last few weeks, and Jim Mortensen and other members, other people, and I think it's safe to say you've got 2 people here that are going to stand alongside you guys and fight for you guys and make sure we can educate as many legislators as we can and try to move this thing in the opposite direction that it just went. So that's my promise to you and public safety workers out there, that we're going to do everything we can to make sure we ship this, make this thing right. So.
Well, thank you. I greatly appreciate that. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't believe the system is broken, but I do think that there's always ways to make the system better. So there are things that we can do to improve the system. Jim Mortensen's a great guy. He's got a lot of knowledge and probably has lots of ideas, just like I do, of how to make the system better for everyone. So don't be afraid to ever reach out, ask us for guidance. Again, You guys cover a lot of things in the legislative session. This is something that we primarily focus on. So we probably know better than most individuals, and probably a little bit more informed. So never feel, always feel free to reach out.
Okay.
And if there's any questions, you can always check out our website. It's h3mn.org.
Awesome.
h3mn.org, everybody. This is the Minnesota Liberty Network. Don't forget to reach out to us as well if you guys have questions about how we feel, and at MinnesotaLibertyNetwork@gmail.com. You can watch us on Rumble, YouTube, and we're working on figuring out what a live stream might look like. So thanks again, Chris. Drew, anything else to say?
Nope. Just want to thank Chris for his advocacy with H3 and everything that he does, and we just appreciate it. I'm glad we got to connect with you, and thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I look forward to continuing this conversation in the future.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.